Thank you everyone so much for being here. My name is Kyrena Wright. I'm actually the Associate Director of Student Engagement in Undergraduate Student Life. So I actually at Columbia oversee all of the student clubs and organizations and have a huge part in the leadership development of our student organizations and our student leaders. And I've been at Columbia just about 5 years this summer. So we're joined by 3 current students, and I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves in 1 second. But just to give you an overview of what the session is going to look like, I'm going to ask the students a few questions about their experience, what it's been like for them these past few years at Columbia, what they're involved in, their leadership roles and responsibilities, and then allow you all to ask them some questions a little bit later on. So start thinking of questions that you would love to ask our students today, so that we can have those either in the chat, or you can raise your hand or unmute yourself when that time comes for you to ask our students some questions. So to start, I'll have them introduce themselves. So they're going to say their name, their class year, their school, their major, and their pronouns. So I'll start off with Zane, then Khadijah, then Barbara, and I'm going to mute myself so they can unmute.
Hi everyone, I'm Zane Bakit. I'm a biochem pre-med major and I'm CC class of 2023, and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Hi everyone, my name is Khadijah. I'm Barnard class of 2022. I'm a physics major and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Barbara Kroback. I am Barnard class of 2022 and my pronouns are she, her, hers.
Perfect, thank you all. So to start off, I would love for you all to hear what each of our students are involved in or have been involved in at Columbia. So we'll start off with Khadijah, followed by Barbara, followed by Zane, to talk about their list of involvement.
Sure. So when I started out at Columbia, I was involved in the Columbia University Film Productions organization, as well as the Barnard Student Government Association. And now currently I am the president of the Columbia University Engineers Without Borders Morocco chapter, as well as the vice president for the activities board at Columbia.
Awesome. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but I am an urban studies major, which is part of my involvement in how I engage with the Barnard community, attending their program events and getting to know other students, following the urban review and other events related to that. However, in general, since coming to Barnard, I got involved with the Columbia Catholic Ministry pretty quickly. Um, Finding that having that faith community and being able to be close to that and making that part of my life even in college was very important to me. So now I'm have the honor of being one of the co-presidents, and within that I'm also involved with the student governing board, the SGB, which actually works closely with Kyrena to manage and assist student groups on campus.
I am I'm an NSOP committee member. I write for blog. I work with the Go Ask Alice department. I work in the Goldblum laboratory, biology laboratory on campus, and I am a member of United Against Inequities in Disease.
Perfect. Thank you all. So you kind of alluded to this a little bit, each of you in your answers thus far, but what has been your favorite part of your Columbia experience thus far in your journey? So we'll start with Barbara, and then we'll go to Zane and then Khadijah.
Yeah, favorite part. I feel like there's so many small moments just being a student that end up standing out in my memory. But I think especially with this past semester, being able to be on campus, in spite of the pandemic, being able to face the regulations that we have and be able to dorm and use the facilities in a safe manner with respecting everyone's space. I think independence has been the biggest part for me, learning it, but then also just being able to I think cherish it as well in this moment of our lives where we have the school to support us but still are in the Upper West Side, are able to explore the neighborhoods, spend this time with friends, learn things about ourselves that, in high school with our family just weren't able to present themselves in the same way. So that's what came to mind for me, just getting a sense for the real world in that way.
I think my favorite part of the Columbia experience has been the people. I think everybody here is so absolutely amazing, and so in all of their accomplishments or even just who they are as people. And I think it's meeting students, professors, teachers, mentors. Everyone here has been really just a great person. So I think that's probably my favorite part of the experience.
Yeah, definitely going off of what Barbara and Zane said, I think the people are a huge part of what makes this experience so unique and enjoyable. And moreover, just the discussions that we're able to have, whether that be inside the classroom or in an extracurricular environment, the way that professors really push us to stretch our intellects and discuss subject matter that we may not be comfortable with or familiar with, but really embarking on that exploration together, and just this overall curiosity that students share.
Perfect. Thank you all. So my next question is, you all listed a lot of the involvement and things that you have leadership roles within. So can you talk about how has this involvement positively impacted your Columbia experience? So we'll start with Zane this time, then Khadijah, then Barbara.
I think the greatest part about the involvement is, once again, as I mentioned before, not only the people, but also being involved within the Columbia community gives you so much more opportunity to take advantage of everything that Columbia has to offer, because I think Columbia has an extraordinary resources and countless opportunities, countless people to meet. So I think getting involved allows you to take full advantage and recognize and be grateful for everything that you're experiencing, and recognize your extreme privilege in being able to participate in all of these things.
Yeah, definitely. And going off of that, just by getting involved outside of the classroom, you really just get exposure to these people with vastly different passions. And personally, as a physics major, the nature of the academics that I did were very pointed and largely confined to the discipline. And through my involvement in extracurriculars, I was able to meet film majors, more people more heavily engaged in the liberal arts, and still get exposure to all of those unique sorts of interests in people, despite the major I chose or the classes that I took.
Yeah, my answer will be somewhat similar to the idea of being able to step out of the classroom and really get a fuller sense of what our possibilities are. While I've come to learn that while the majors we're in open up so many doors for us, just being able to get a sense of how others are using those doors, using those skills to find new spaces, to find new places to get involved, new ways to work. For example, being with the SGB, with the Student Governing Board, getting to know these clubs where students come from such a variety of backgrounds, whether from life or major wise, but they're still able to engage with each other, learn from each other in ways that I think can't be confined to a classroom, can't be covered in a classroom sometimes. So really that leadership, organization, community building that um, is able to happen so naturally between the students as they work together and learn from each other.
Perfect. Thank you all. So for everyone in the room, there's now about 350 student organizations. And on top of that, even more when you add in Barnard and the graduate schools. And so there's a breadth of opportunity. So I would love if you all could just tell us, how did you decide what you wanted to get involved in? Was it a friend? Was it activities day fair? Like, how did you all, sort of get pulled into these different opportunities that have clearly made such an impact on you all? So I would love if Khadijah could start, then Barbara, then Zane.
Yeah, so that's a good question because I feel like I definitely had the experience as a freshman where I went to the activities fair and was just so excited and overwhelmed by the options that I saw that I definitely put too much on my plate and had to kind of sift through what I wanted to be involved in and what I didn't. And what it ultimately boiled down to, and this clubs that I ended up staying in up until this point had to do with one, just the people that were there, how much they kind of inspired me and motivated me to stay involved and really engage with what the club was doing. And also just maintaining a breadth of club involvement. So Columbia's Engineers Without Borders chapter is obviously more grounded in the engineering and technical dimension of my interests. But then I was also a cinephiliac when I got to college. And so wanted to be involved in CUFP, Columbia Film Productions. And so I just wanted to maintain kind of that all around engagement with my interests.
Yeah, I sort of hinted at mentioned this earlier, but the Columbia Catholic Ministry was a group that I looked into and researched once I decided on Barnard. I knew I had access to those clubs as well, and already knew that that was a community I wanted to find a space in. And I think by continuing my engagement with them, I've been able to see my own personal growth, been able to push for the growth of the club itself as well, which has been challenging, especially as we went virtual and had to navigate new spaces and new ways of working and reaching out, but has definitely taught me a lot. And SGB, as the second major club that I'm a part of, was one that actually was something a friend pulled me in, and he was like, "Oh, I think you'd fit well here." I wasn't sure what it was. Went to a few meetings, said sure, gave it a try, and am now vice chair, which is a weird way to look at it, but I'm really honored and hope I could live up to what the clubs need. But I think some of the other, well, I haven't been able to get fully involved with some of the other clubs on campus. I've mentioned is yes, I said this earlier. Through the people that we get to be involved with, I feel that I've definitely become an a cappella group and dance group enthusiast at Columbia. While I'm not a part of them, I have a lot of friends who are in groups such as Orchestras or Notes and Keys. So getting to watch their performances and support them as they go on, or even in Barnard with the MACAC Activity Council and the student government that's there, just being able to support them when they need advice and feedback and being involved that way, even if it's a bit less formal than actually being part of the club.
So going off what I mentioned before about Columbia having ample resources and opportunities, that was a lot of how I determined what I wanted to be involved in, because I knew I came from a really small town in Southern Ohio. So there weren't that many opportunities to help those in need or to be on the on the edge of world-renowned research like I am working in a lab right now at Columbia. It's a really crazy thing to think about. So a lot of the things that I chose to get involved in were something where I could use the opportunities and resources that Columbia can offer me to help others. So like working with United Against Inequities and Disease, and I also work for with Hearts for the Homeless, where we, do blood pressure readings on the homeless around New York, things like that. It was really just about trying to spread the wealth. And then other things like writing for blog or being on the NSOP committee was about things that I was passionate about and things that I thought that I would enjoy spending my time doing.
Great, thank you all. So I know one thing most folks are very curious about, because we just never lived through something like this, is what was it like being a student at Columbia during a global pandemic? How did it impact you? What changed? What was your year like as a student at Columbia? And do we want to start with Zane, then Khadijah, then Barbara? Zane, you're already on the screen, so perfect.
It was tough. It was definitely really tough. We were navigating obviously something unprecedented times, something that no one had ever been through before. So it was it was a learning curve. It was a lot to figure out as you went. But as we got used to it, I think it got easier, and it got online classes were a whole new world to discover and figure out how to navigate. So it was it was definitely tough, but I think we all figured it out in the end, and it got a lot easier as it went on.
Yeah, I think especially in the first kind of transition, I definitely struggled a lot with figuring out how to manage my time, stay engaged in a Zoom lecture, which can prove pretty difficult, especially when you're living at home with those distractions. But I think as time went on, the school adjusted very well to how things should operate virtually. And I think students also figured out how we can continue to maintain the connections that we had. I know physics study groups went virtual for us, and we kind of just took those steps to navigate it together.
I definitely echo what Zain and Khadijah have said. Definitely want to build on that idea, what Khadijah was saying about how students were able to still find a way to stay connected and find ways to relate to each other. I took an intro course in the fall when we first went virtual, and it was one where there was a majority of freshman students, and just being able to see how they're still able to get in touch with each other, create those student support networks that usually are much easier to create when you see each other, sit next to someone in class, and get their phone number or email. But they were still able to get past that, and as a junior, being able to support that a little bit as well was really great. And being able to see how the school is able to support that through the different activities that they continue to host and engage students in, despite the strangeness and the difficulties that came along with being on Zoom, and definitely being reflective. That's something I want to throw in as well. I think student groups and professors and students themselves just grew in reflecting on, okay, Zoom, we're tired. Maybe we should take a break right now, 5 minutes, get some coffee, stretch. Or can this be covered in email and whatnot, and finding those balances.
Great, thank you all. And so my final question before we open it up to everyone who's here is, what are you looking forward to most for next year, next academic year? So we'll start with Barbara, since you're on the screen, and then we'll go to Zain and end with Khadijah.
For sure. I'm so excited for the potential of being fully on campus. I know that nothing has been officially said, but the possibility of, the spring semester already being on dorming and on campus and being able to use the facilities, though limited, for the potential of that to be accessible, especially to the freshman and sophomore classes, to be able to see each other, to continue to grow in the ways, because of the struggles we've had to face in the past year, being able to continue to grow from what we've learned from them. Because I think there's still a lot of potential there, and I'm excited to see where it'll go, especially as we get new ideas and new students on board.
Yeah, I think Barbara said it perfectly. I was on campus the entire year throughout the pandemic, and it was really sad how little people were out here, and how different everything was. So I'm just really excited to hopefully have a return to normalcy of campus.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to echo what Zain and Barbara said. Really excited to return to campus, especially after this year of largely being virtual, having this newfound appreciation for physically being together, and whether that's in a classroom or at a club meeting or in your lab. I'm just really excited to resume those activities. Yeah.
Great, thank you all. So that's all the questions I had for the students. I would love if anyone who's joining us today, either unmute yourself, you can ask a question, or write a question in the chat, and I can read it out to the students if that's your preference. But feel free to start asking the students some questions.
Can I start with May I start with a question?
Yes, of course, go ahead.
Sure. So how are there any obstacles placed in the way of Barnard students who want to do activities at the college or the engineering school or vice versa. In my time, there was always a little bit of energy barrier, someone who had to be convinced, and it could be done, but there was somehow the sense that they were different undergraduate institutions. Has that, I hope, gone away?
Great question. Barbara, do you want to start off with that one?
Sure. I think I can speak to the fact that the schools still maintain their individuality. I think when you attend Barnard, you know that it's Barnard and not Columbia College. In terms of logistics and involvement with groups, there's a governing board for Barnard, which is separate from the student governing board at Columbia. So that can, although they ultimately do work together once a year for the funding at Columbia University meeting and other such organizational meetings that have to happen. In terms of other blockades, I think at the one thing that comes to mind right now is in the beginning of the spring semester, there was some mix-ups between Barnard College IDs getting into Columbia buildings. Luckily, that was quickly resolved. Other than that, I personally haven't experienced any large interferences as a Barnard student. If anything, it brings a nice piece into the conversation when we talk about experiences and possibilities at the college.
Perfect. Khadijah, do you want to give your input on what it's like as a Barnard student?
Yeah, sure. So I am a 4+1 student, and so I had a lot of interest in getting involved in the engineering activities, which are largely held at Columbia. And I am very glad that I really didn't experience any sort of resistance when it came to wanting to have a board position on a Columbia Engineering Club or be involved at a Columbia Medical Center lab. I really didn't feel like one that I was treated differently or there was a hesitance to embrace my contributions. It really feels like it's pretty level playing field and just what you have to bring to the table.
Great, thank you. It looks like we have some questions in the chat, so I'm going to get to those and then we'll have some more folks unmute themselves. So this one is a pretty short one. I think it's either a yes or no question, but did Columbia refund any amount for room and board or tuition? Does anyone want to speak to that? You know if that happened? I'm unsure, but if any of our students know, feel free to unmute yourself. If you don't, that's okay too.
I can
Barbara?
say, yeah. I believe there was a COVID adjustment. I can't say whether it was specific to tuition or room and board, but just reviewing account status and whatnot, there were COVID adjustments that came in and supports that I can speak to in that way.
So the next question is, so one of the unique things about Columbia is the relationship with New York and Harlem. Can each of you talk about how you were able to get involved in the city, if you were able to before and possibly during COVID? I know that many of you were not here during COVID, so maybe you can speak to before COVID and your relationship with New York City. Barbara, do you want to start since you're on the screen, and then we'll go Khadijah, Zane?
Sure. Relationship to New York City. I am actually a New York local, grew up in Brooklyn. So my engagement with New York City actually expanded a lot by coming to Columbia and Barnard. All my elementary school, middle school, high school experience was mainly in Brooklyn. So I definitely took advantage of being on the Upper West Side, only having maybe a 20-30 minute train ride to another neighborhood in Manhattan rather than a 40-minute hour train ride from the other boroughs. So that was definitely a thing. I think experiencing New York City during the pandemic was a whole new way to learn about it, with the restaurants being now outside on the sidewalks and managing that, knowing the limits of when you're able to use it and what that looks like, and reaching out to friends and seeing if they're comfortable doing that yet or not, and what that is like. Yeah, I think just being there has been the biggest thing for me, being in Manhattan, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I too am a New York City local, so not a lot of diversity of opinion here, but I think just with going to college in the city, or just that experience kind of reframes um, all of the kind of memories in your relationship that, or at least that I had built up until that point. Um, I grew up on the Lower East Side, so honestly not very far, but definitely a different energy. And when I moved, or when I would be on campus, just making new memories there, meeting new people, honestly, a lot of what shaped my perception of New York and so my appreciation for it was understanding what other people, non-New Yorkers, really saw in it and valued about it, and taking a moment to think, wait a second, this is actually a really special place.
I am not a New York City local. I'm from Ohio. So I adore New York City. I love it so much, and being here, fortunate enough to be here for the past year, even through the pandemic, I'm really eternally grateful for. I think something big I always do is me and my friends often explore different parts of the city, museums, any new art exhibits that come around, trying new restaurants, but also trying to give back to the people who live in New York City, and working with groups that are involved in local underrepresented areas and things like that is something that I try to do consistently. And yeah, I think I love New York City so much. It's much better than Ohio, in my opinion.
Nice. Thank you all. I'm also from Brooklyn. I didn't know that about you all. So next question is about study abroad. So I can answer the second part of the question. It's are there going to be study abroad opportunities for next year? We're still unsure about what is going to be allowed in terms of travel. But to ask you all, are you interested in studying abroad at any point in time during the rest of your Columbia experience? Zane, do you want to start, and then we'll do Barbara Khadijah?
Sure. So I was thinking about studying abroad last summer, but that did not go through. I've never really considered it, but there is a program Columbia does um, for scientific research in Germany for the summer. And if study abroad next summer is available, that is definitely something I think I would look into, but it's not one of my priorities.
Personally, I am in a unique situation with the scholarship that I am currently attending Barnard with. So study abroad wasn't something I had on my radar, but definitely traveling, especially as the COVID regulations and COVID in general calms down, is definitely on my radar, even maybe as a way to celebrate graduation next year. So we'll see what that will look like.
Yeah, I would have liked to study abroad, but just with the way that physics major requirements are very specific to the school, it would have been difficult for me to complete all of those and go abroad. But again, travel is definitely on the radar.
Perfect. Thank you all. Our next question from the chat is, can you tell us your honest opinion of the core? Are you receptive to the core? Do you think it appropriately balances the past and the present? Zane, do you want to start? Then Khadijah, then Barbara.
Yeah, sure. So I think I'm more fond of the core than a lot of my peers, only because I didn't learn a lot of this stuff in high school. I didn't have the opportunity to read a lot of these books or really study anything like this. So that is one reason I appreciate it. But I do find that it seems really outdated a lot, especially with the discourse that we have nowadays about different groups of people and everything like that. I think that there's a lot of times where it seems really outdated, and that there could be a better balance, especially in classes like Lit Hum or CC, with the books that you're reading. But otherwise, I'm pretty fond of it. I like the idea of having like what they think is a well-rounded education in like a lot of subjects. And especially with being a STEM major, there is a lot of like the global cores and music and art hum. I would never have taken a class like that if it wasn't required. So having those classes, I think, really enhances my education.
Yeah, I can't really speak to the core because I am a Barnard student, and that is not what we're required to complete. but I definitely have heard from my CC friends that a similar issue with it, them feeling like it's kind of outdated and could be modified, updated to reflect present day thought questions and just pertinent subject matter.
I mainly echo what Khadija says. As a Barnard student, I'm not required to take the core, but yeah, through interactions with friends and peers and clubs and classes, I am a little bit jealous of the core. Some of the readings, even what Zane was saying, I never read these books in high school, and some of them would be good to have, under your belt and be familiar with. But yeah, generally, I think there is a sense of there's space for improvement.
Perfect. Thank you all. Not sure if any of you can speak to this, but can any of you explain what a 4+1 student is? Any of you know
Yes.
that? Okay, go
Sorry.
Khadija, great.
I didn't contextualize it when I said that I was, but a 4+1 student is essentially a program that Barnard has where you complete your 4 years of undergrad at Barnard and you receive a Bachelor of Arts, and then you move forward to do 1 year at Columbia to get your master's degree. And in my case, I would be doing the 1 year at Columbia Engineering to get my master's degree.
Perfect. Thank you for explaining that. So for our next question, I'm just going to read it. It's beyond getting one of the many options for the COVID-19 vaccine that are currently in the process for approval at the FDA. What would help you all feel safer on campus and exploring New York when you get back on campus? And is there anything that alumni in New York or DC or anywhere else can do to help? Khadija, do you want to start since you're here, and then we'll go Barbara, then Zane?
Yeah, sure. This is a really generous question too that you guys are offering to help us out with this, but I think definitely requiring students to return vaccinated and being pretty rigorous and stringent with checks about that would be important to me as a student to feel safe on campus. So being just reinforcing vaccination protocols. But beyond that, I think capacity limits in on-campus buildings or just confined spaces is honestly something that we should do, even though we have this vaccine and we have so many improvements in infection rates, just for general hygienic purposes, because those places can get immensely crowded. So those would be my two ideas, but I don't know if Barbara or Zane have anything in mind.
Yeah, I think what Khadija said, vaccination is a big part of this. I think in general, just this question, to have it on top of mind throughout this year, this upcoming year especially, I think whether it's professors, students, administration, to be able to continue to ask their students, their peers, do you feel safe? Is there anything else we can do? And that can take the form of forms, or I know there was a lot of sort of like study groups started by the administration that students can participate in to reflect those experiences and those feelings. Just making sure that especially the newer students to campus know that they can speak up about those things when they do feel unsafe or unsure about something.
I'm not sure I have much to add. I think having the vaccine requirement is great. And I think maybe continuing with some level of testing, especially if you're starting to feel symptoms, I think, and isolating if needed. Continuing with those patterns, I think would be the most effective at allowing as much of the student body as possible to have as much normalcy as possible. And also, you're very kind. Thank you for what you said.
Perfect. Thank you all for sharing. And just a reminder to folks, this seems to be working well, adding questions to the chat. So continue to add questions to the chat that you would like to ask our 3 students. But while we do that, I'll jump into the next question. So everyone says that the future of Columbia experience will involve some form of hybrid learning. What parts of your recent experience would you like to remain? Zane, do you want to start, and then we'll go Khadijah, Barbara?
Yeah. Looking back, I think the only thing I would be reluctant to let go of is having all of my lectures recorded, and I can go back and look at what the professor said at any time in the lecture whenever I need to, versus when classes are in person. If I don't write down what the professor says when I'm in class, I never hear it again. So I think that is one thing that if we could somehow have transcripts or recorded lectures from now on, that would be really great.
Yeah, definitely the lecture recordings I would love to remain in place as just a general best practice among professors, because I think we've all had the experience of just having a professor who maybe talks too fast or can kind of skim over things really quickly that end up on the exam. So recordings are super helpful. I also, during the brief period that we were allowed on the campus, I think it was really effective to have library reservations. I feel like it was just a great way of keeping that orderliness to just usage of the spaces and ensuring that they're treated properly and maintained properly.
I didn't think of that a minute ago, and now you're totally right, Khadijah, especially with what you were saying earlier in terms of safety and feeling secure, especially during finals when, you know, this, like you said, the spaces get so crowded and packed. Those reservations are actually super helpful to me as well, so I can second that. In terms of other hybrid learning, continued engagement in terms of whether that's like breakout rooms or just breaks. I think being able to engage with that way in a more personal level and a more casual level when you're in a breakout room, but also having the time to take a breath, grab some water, without feeling like you're missing something or feeling guilty about it because, you know, the professor might say something really important while you're away when you were in person and whatnot. I think that made it for a much easier space to navigate.
Great. I would have loved recorded lectures when I was in college. Oh, that would have been amazing. Thank you all for sharing. So our next question is there anything alumni can do for you as you head towards graduation? It says some of us have done mentoring via Odyssey or Columbia College Women. What recommendations do you have? Barbara, do you want to start? And then we'll go Zane, Khadijah.
Sure. Actually, the mentoring via Odyssey or Columbia College, I might have heard about Columbia College Women, but I've never heard about the Odyssey one. So actually getting more information on that would be great. I think personally, I am aware of the alumni presence sort of in the back of mind type of way. I'd love to see what that can look like if it was more forefront in terms of, I know we have the possibility and the comfort of using Zoom or other formats that might make it easier for alumni who aren't necessarily in the city to engage with students, and maybe making those things more of a norm. That's the one thing that could come to mind, just contact and visibility.
Yeah, I would agree with what Barbara said. More contact with alumni and visibility, I think, is a great thing to say. But then also what we can do for alumni as well, especially the alumni who did not get a graduation for the past 2 years due to the pandemic. I think if we had maybe some event for them, that would be really incredible. Some event on campus where they could come celebrate or something like that once the restrictions are lifted.
Yeah, definitely. And then to add to that, I know alumni both at Barnard and Columbia play a huge role in career advancement and after college opportunity seeking and that entire process. But I think particularly in these virtual semesters, I found that graduating seniors had a lot of uncertainty, as many college grads did entering the workforce. And I think the alumni go on to work at such fascinating, unique places, and kind of having a more direct channel of communication with those alumni, and really just to be able to build that understanding of the opportunities that are available to graduates coming out of Columbia, I think would be really beneficial. So building that out somehow.
Great, thank you all. So I have another question from someone, and it says, with today being the anniversary of George Floyd's murder, how do you feel Columbia has handled everything that came out during this past year? Take a second. I know that might be a heavy question. Khadijah, would you like to go first, and then Barbara, then Zane?
Yeah, so I can really speak to how Barnard faculty and administration specifically responded to those incidents, and how we kept how the president and the deans really kept their finger on the pulse when the trials came around this year, and really regularly reaching out to students to talk about how we as a community should cope with the outcomes of and rulings of the trials, and also just the response that the murder had last year, and really promoting having conversations about it with, and just bringing it to the forefront, and not having it be something that's acknowledged and then swept under the rug. Like incidents like this have had a tendency to be in the past.
For sure. I wanted to add by speaking a little bit more towards the student reaction in connection with administration in terms of SGB and students mobilizing and working towards growing awareness and growing discussions around making discussions about these topics that and issues that have been brought to the light in greater degrees a norm. I know that there was a big movement, and I think it'll continue as we move into this new academic year, for there to be a student fund specific to supporting Black-owned businesses around campus that students often, may be working with or may not be as aware of, but to one way to grow the community in that sense. And just with the groups that I've been involved with, being extra reflective and knowing how to speak with administration, with professors to raise those expectations for them and for ourselves about how we manage these conversations and these situations, so that we, as Khadijah said, so that these things don't just get swept under the rug just because they're uncomfortable.
Yeah, I agree with everything said before me. I think also the professors were really accommodating, especially if students needed extra time or time away from class or anything like that, extra time on assignments to deal with the situations going on. I think everyone was really accommodating. And I also think the university did the best job that they could with everything being online, because without having the entire community on campus, I think it made it a little difficult to give the situation as much respect as it deserved. But I think with, an email or Zoom being the main form of contact, I think they handled it the best way that they could.
Great, thank you all for sharing that. It looks like we have another question from Jonathan. This one says, can you describe research opportunities that are open to you? And I will even expand upon that. If you have been involved in a research opportunity, can you speak to that as well? Zane, do you want to start? And then we'll do Barbara, Khadijah.
Yeah, so I think students have a lot of research opportunities available. There are countless labs, countless professors, projects going on campus at all times. I have been involved for this summer throughout the past school year and the last summer in different research projects. And I actually got most of them just by emailing professors who had research I was interested in and saying, can I please work in your lab? So I got a publication in the radiology clinical research department. And right now I'm working in Dr. Goldblum's biology laboratory over in the Fairchild building. And so, yeah, I would say that students have a lot of research opportunities, especially if they know where to look and how to get them. And there's also internships and funding, and yeah, I would definitely say it's adequate.
I second that. I personally haven't been part of a formal research program. I think in general, my classes have allowed me to engage in in research, formal, informal, whether for a paper or for a podcast or for a video in that sense. But I agree with saying the amount of emails that I get with so many research opportunities that come our way, just in email format, are immense. And yeah, professors are always open to help with those as well.
Yeah, I am definitely in agreement with Zane and Barbara. And you're not even restricted to kind of your academic interests. I started out as a physics major, but was really interested in biophysics research. Didn't have a super strong background in biology, but was able to work at a lab at Columbia Medical Center for 2 years just by going to research opportunity fairs, seeing what I was interested in, and then reaching out. It's honestly one of the greatest merits of the school, I think.
Perfect, thank you. It looks like a question just popped in. It says that now that digital learning tools have become a part of the everyday experience, some of your professors may have had new opportunities to bring in guest speakers to your courses. These guest speakers might be in any location around the world. Have you found that some of your courses have included guest lectures? And if so, what have you thought of these opportunities? I will also add, if it's a non-academic guest speaker, because I know student clubs have also explored speakers from around the world as well. So can you speak to those opportunities as well? How about you do Khadija, Zane, and then Barbara?
Yeah, so I personally did not have courses with guest speakers, but I did have several friends who whose professors would bring in other experts in their fields or academics who were working on relevant research. But then speaking to clubs, I know for Columbia Film Productions, they were able to have several people from industry on calls on Zoom, giving talks, just because of the increased availability and the ease of using Zoom to get in contact. So.
Yeah, I personally did not have any guest lectures in my classes, although that would have been really cool. But I was working with a program in the neuro ICU over the school year, and we would have every week a different lecture from a guest attending doctor in the hospital. So that was pretty cool, but that was probably the extent of my guest lecture experience.
I actually had 2 courses that had guest lecturers come regularly, and that was spring 2020, right before the pandemic. So it was interesting to see how they were able to continue that as we stepped into virtual learning. And I think it's become more of a norm for a lot of classes. And then in terms of clubs, the Columbia Catholic Ministry was able to develop quite a few weekly events where we have a retreat coordinator, and they reach out to different organizations across New York City, but also other states, to just get a sense of what they're doing, how we can be involved, and potentially we could pull on those connections as we step into more in-person or hybrid engagement on campus.
Great, thank you. Going back to an earlier question, I hope that's also something that is able to continue in the future, bringing in a breadth of knowledge all over the country or even all over the world. So thank you for that. Looks like another question's popped in. So someone in the room has a daughter who's in high school preparing for applying to college. Do you have any advice you could give her daughter in regards to applying for Columbia or Barnard? So Barbara, would you like to start? And then we'll have Khadijah and Zane.
For sure. A piece of advice that I think I've shared with others before is, or what helped me choose Barnard was actually going there. It was an admitted students day, I think, and I know this can be harder now with travel restrictions, but just hearing from other students, getting to know their experiences, getting to know what works for them, what didn't work for them, and being able to compare that to my own expectations. Um, yeah, getting a sense for the real life experience there. And in terms of the application itself and those logistics, being yourself as much as you can. I think it can be very tempting to try to build up an image. Um, but I feel like the answers of the essays, the responses that I wrote, where I was most true to the way I was feeling, the experiences I had, were the ones I was most proud of, and am able to still reflect on today sometimes.
Yeah, and just adding to what Barbara said, I think hopefully this advice isn't too hackneyed, but I think really just looking at Columbia or Barnard and identifying the parts of it that will really allow you to grow from where you are as an applicant, seeing where you are in this current stage, where you see yourself exiting college. And I don't mean strictly academic. I think a lot of what I touched on in applying to Barnard was the way I, as an individual and just having the identity that I have, and in the environment I was raised on, how I want to take those experiences and add to them, and really build myself up to be the kind of person that I want to be and the kind of member of society that I see myself being.
Yeah, going off of what everyone said, in terms of the actual application, I think the essays are really, really important, especially the Columbia specific questions within the Common App. And also, like Barbara said, visiting Columbia, because when I first got into Columbia, I didn't want to go at all, funnily enough. And not until did I visit during days on campus did I fall in love and absolutely need to come to Columbia. So I think really visiting the university is the best way to decide if you should apply there, if you're going to feel yourself there, feel that you can reach your full potential there, is the most important part.
Great, thank you. So with 5 minutes left, I'm going to ask you all our final question. Doesn't come from the chat, but I'm going to wrap it up. So my question is, what would you like the alumni in the room to know? One final thing about what it's like to be a student of today. And you can take that in any direction you want, but what would you like their final remembrance of a student today to be? Zane, I'm going to start with you since you're here, so take a second. And then we'll go Barbara and then end with Khadijah.
I want to say that being a student today is a lot more about fighting to use the resources that you are provided with to help as many people as possible. Or at least that's what my goal is as a student today.
Yeah, I would say being a student today is, it involves the chaos and stress that I think a student life has for many years, but I think also now there's almost a sense of responsibility and hope and a recognition that young people and people our age have a lot of power and influence to shape what we want the world to look like, and it's not solely in the hands of students that came before us. And I think that's really exciting.
I agree with what both Khadijah and Zane have said, and wanted to add that student of today, I think there is an even greater push for being reflexive, really taking a step back and trying to see the bigger picture, because there's more to it than sometimes your own experience, and you want to make sure that you're aware of all the possibilities, all the perspectives to the best you can before jumping in all the way, and continuing to reflect, trying to see what am I missing from the picture and how can I continue add to it, or learn from someone else.
Perfect. Thank you all. So that's all the time we have today. So I definitely want to thank Khadijah, Barbara, and Zane for joining us today. I know how nerve-wracking it can also be. So thank you for your vulnerability, listening, answering all of our questions, answering the alumni's questions. You all did an amazing job. And thank you to all the alum who are here today and engaged with us during this opportunity. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. Bye, everyone.